Hello, everybody. It is great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO and president of GSD Get You Done Venture Studios, the premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17 time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company that co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GST that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. With that, I have an incredible guest today. My guest, Sanjay Bhatia, is a seven-time serial entrepreneur and has had several successful exits. In fact, one of his projects was with Rihanna and the Fenty brand. Today, we're going to be talking about the psychology behind travel and experiences, why travel and entertainment are essential to human happiness. With that, I'd like to bring my friend on board. Hi, Sanjay.
Happy Friday.
Welcome to the show. Today, we're deep diving into the psychology behind why we travel, why we seek out experiences, and how these activities shape our happiness, health, and overall well being. So, Sanjay, so tell us a little bit about your background.
So spent my career building AI companies. Went to Georgia Tech, studied computer graphics there. After that, worked at Microsoft. Sort of took what I was thinking about doing in terms of video game technology, brought it to e-commerce, and then shifted to analytics. Built a quant hedge fund that was a quant fund, turned to a software company. Had a call tracking analytics company called CallRail that's doing really well. Last project we worked with Rihanna's Fenty brand to launch stores used AI and LiDAR to do measurement during the pandemic. We were able to actually achieve greater accuracy from 6 feet away than a tape measure right up to your body. And now working on Run Day, we're uniting AI and human agents for unstoppable growth.
Excellent. So let's get back through it. I know you and I just took a trip recently. We went over to Thailand for stem cells. But why do humans have such a strong desire to travel? What do you think?
We're in this transitional age right now. And so, we had the prehistoric age into the agricultural, industrial, information age. We're now in the experiential age. So some elements of it is what people buy today, they're not products, they're not services, they're actually experiences. And we're shifting now. The next age is going to be the agentic age where most of these experiences are actually with AI agents, and that's a lot of what we're seeing at Run Day with our clients. And so before agriculture, we humans would travel all the time. We were migratory. We would go to an area, we would sort of like, use up the resources, and then we would move on. So traveling, is just sort of and there's still cultures, even in the last today and last couple hundred years that are, gypsy cultures, things like that. And then people have sometimes this nomadic or gypsy lifestyle. So, depending on where you come from. It might just be in your genes, but if you go far back enough, it's in all of our genes. And so we're all, kind of nomadic, a nomadic species, if you will. We don't just stay in one place. So now we do it for different reasons now. It went from, okay, we ate all the plants and animals and we got to move on somewhere else, to now it's like, okay, the conferences and whichever part of the world it's in, because it has a nice resort there that they did a deal with. So it's just in our heritage, it's in our genes, and then we're in this experiential age. So until AI and augmented reality and these new technologies can provide better experiences than traveling is where it creates more happiness. There's some studies also indicating that the actual expectation of travel sometimes even creates more happiness than the travel itself.
Well, you look at it, and travel really taps into and you mentioned it, our primal need for exploration and novelty. And as a psychologist, we say it's really linked to dopamine in your brain, right? We're wired to seek new experiences and new stimuli as part of this evolution for learning and really to survive. So you're right; it goes back. The other thing is, companies like Simplenight go out and are actually making it a whole lot easier because there's a lot of infobesity around travel because it's a real pain, right? You're flying over to Bangkok. Which plane do you fly on? What seat do you get on the plane? What hotel do you get when you're there? How do you go out in the activities? Maybe you want a massage. Maybe you want to travel to Phuket. Maybe you want to go to Pattaya. All those kind of things. We've got, we're wired for the stimuli in the experience, but at the same time, we're inundated with obesity. So, yeah, it's interesting. But how does this travel affect our mental health and happiness? What do you think? I know you like to do yoga, so it's tied in. There's some parallelisms between yoga and travel. But what do you think? What does it do for us?
Well, I mean, the
What is
yoga
yoga? What does
world.
yoga do for you? For you personally, when
So
you do your yoga, what happens to you
So
mentally?
yoga, so I've studied Ayurveda, which is the master science of yoga. So yoga is part of this Ayurvedic master science. And there's, yoga, there's meditation, there's breath work, there's massage, there's a bunch of pieces to it. The original intention of yoga was really just to help you meditate for many, many, many hours. You're just going to sit there for 8 hours and your body's not in a good place. Your mind's not going to be able to keep up. You're going to just get cramps and back pain and all kinds of stuff. So yoga is actually in the West, we talk about when we say yoga, we mean what's called asana. So asana is the physical practice. And the original intent of that was just to be able to facilitate your to sleep better, to be able to meditate better, that your body's pains or limitations aren't interfering with your ability to execute these other things that were considered more important. Yoga today is very much about the fitness side of it, the asana, but also a lot of it's just the travel experiences. People go, it's almost like getting away from I mean, we have a very, I'll call it chemically toxic environment in the United States today. And so a lot of these, for me, it's just interesting how I can go to these other places, almost eat like a pig, and I lose weight. And I have a slice of bread in the U.S. and I gain weight. There's, RFK's revealing a lot of very, shocking and interesting things right now. But also, it's just like kind of that variety of what are the experiences that people do. What's food? Food is such a aspect of culture. Until you've had the authentic food from a place by being there, how do you know what your favorite food even is? Like the are the Chinese restaurants run by Mexicans in Fort Lauderdale, is that really the best Chinese food, or do I need to go to Hong Kong for that or somewhere else, right?
Yeah, and yoga and travel act as a reset button for your mind, doesn't it? When you're doing your yoga, it really resets you. You're stepping away from your routines and familiar environments. Your stress goes down, and you get positive emotions from it. It feels good to do it, right? You're getting a massage. You're doing something where you don't have to think about the rest of the world. You can just relax. And so travel's like that too, right? It increases your happiness through the dopamine, and increases the mindfulness. You become more present, just like yoga. I'm sure when you're doing your yoga, on one side you're present, on the other side you're everywhere, right? It's kind of like a unique way.
Yeah, if you
So
ask people what they would do, if they won the lottery or if they retired, the number one thing is travel. And I can't remember the stat right now, but like many Americans just don't even have a passport. A lot of people haven't been out of the country very much, or they've just gone to Americanized resorts in places like Cancun. So until you've seen that, and I'm guilty of that too in terms of mindset, right? So when we went to Bangkok, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, is my phone going to work? Is my ATM card going to work? I was thinking of them as almost a third world country where I have to be concerned about my electronics and my, financial access and everything. And then, but it really shifted me in a lot of ways. I came back to the US and I kind of, unfortunately, realized like nothing's working here, and things were like the 5G was so much faster over there. And it's like Silicon Valley is an example where they invented, internet and wireless technologies there, but it's really bad, right?
yeah, it's really bad. It's unbelievable.
And so until you do this, until you go to Silicon Valley, try to use your phone, and go to Bangkok, try to use your phone. Until you actually do these things, you have sometimes you would not think that, right? Your assumption would be, they invented this stuff in Silicon Valley. It's the most high tech place on earth, and the Wi-Fi is going to be great. The 5G is going to be great. Everything's going to be the best in the world. Well, it's kind of the opposite. You go to these countries who've actually implemented these technologies more recently, and they've had the ability to just use the latest greatest once it existed, and it's actually a lot better. But you'd never know that, right? You would never know that. There's no meme about it. There's no one's reporting on this stuff. Those experiences give you a perspective on our modern world.
Is there science behind the idea that experiences bring more happiness than possessions. And I'm rhetorically saying that, but it's quite interesting, right? There's a guy at Cornell named Gilovich, Dr. Gilovich, that says that experiences create lasting memories, becoming part of our identity and foster these social relationships. So, kind of like yoga, right? You having these experiences, you develop these relationships. And then the other thing is, on one side, possessions. What do you think, Sanjay? Do you think possessions bring you happiness, or do you think experiences bring you happiness?
All the data suggests it's more the experience side. You have these different brain chemicals. You have oxytocin, you have dopamine, you have serotonin, and the thing about them is that you build a tolerance. Again, anything you do too much of. So you might love a thing, right? You may love, like I collect watches, so I love doing watches. um, whatever, or say you like a certain kind of food. Well, if you just eat that food every day, you're not going to get that same dopamine hit. Or, I mean, dopamine's really the kind of the variety chemical, right? So it's like trying different foods all the time gives you dopamine. Just having a food you really love, especially if it's super super sugary, that gives you that serotonin boost. And so, you just have to have a healthy mix of these neurochemicals to be happy. Happiness is really like, if you were going to measure it, it's sort of a neurochemical variety and abundance. But the challenge is we're just not wired in such a way where the same thing, I mean, some animals are. Some animals can just, they don't have a limbic system. They have like different neurological apparatus, and they can just do the same thing every day and be happy. Humans, I mean, I look at my dog, like they have a much more developed neurology like we do, but still they can do some of the same things. They don't need anywhere near the diversity that we do. But we're the species that, went to the moon, that went to the bottom of the sea, that climbed every mountain. We just have that innate in our species, and without it, we just don't thrive as much.
So, what do you think? Do you think what role does novelty play in why we seek out new destinations or entertainment? Why is that? What do you think?
What's novelty? It's also this idea of certainty, uncertainty, these different basic human needs. So if you look at TikTok and how that works, right? So what they are doing is giving you novelty and also giving you a combination of things you like and things you don't like, because there's sort of a gambling element of it. Like, hey, is the next thing going to be any good? Like your that anticipation affects a lot of people. A lot of people have that predisposition to gambling, and the phenomenon of TikTok is really leveraging that. And so you
Um,
really got
no, no, go ahead.
And so you really got to look at the individual, their personality. I mean, like we all love to travel, but how much you want to travel varies person to person. And so some people might be, traveling. My dad, he travels all the time. He's on a plane every 2 weeks, in his 70s. I don't like traveling as much. I'd love to do, say, a trip a month. Some people, they find a home that they really enjoy, and they're homebodies, right? They reluctantly take a trip or two every year.
So, if you had a choice, if you could have a beautiful home set up and your dog and significant other there, what would you rather do, travel or to be home?
I think when I was younger, I'd probably pick the travel. And then I think as I'm getting older, I'm more inclined to just have a nice home. But I want both. So it's like how much of each do I want? Sort of it also changes as you age.
The new environments and experiences spark the creativity and make time feel fuller, right? It makes time feel more enriching, giving life a better meaning, doesn't it? And satisfaction. And yeah, something to talk about. Uh,
Yeah, the other element of travel is actually people traveling to you. So, like I'm more inclined on the home side now because like, people will come, Fort Lauderdale's a place everybody wants to come to. And so it's not hard to convince someone to visit you. So just, you sort of experience it through their eyes. And even if you're not going anywhere, it's, it gives you in a lot of ways that same experience as traveling or planning the travel for a lot of people. Just the planning process creates a lot of dopamine and excitement and happiness, sometimes more than the trip itself.
What do you think in terms of, the new experiences with travel? How does it contribute to personal growth and transformation?
A lot of it's perspective. Even basic things like you like opening up a blank YouTube, right, on your browser. If you go to California, you open a blank YouTube, you see a lot of horrible things about Florida. You go to Florida, you open up the blank YouTube, and you see a lot of horrible things with California. So even the digital lives we have today are very much influenced by where you are. It's a cool experiment. Just use a VPN and like flip out the city, right? So even without leaving your desk, like just flip out the city on your browser, and you'll see how much you know you can call it propaganda or bias or whatever negatively, but just how much variety and diversity there is just based on where you are, and how much or even our digital lives are affected by that. So I'd say if nothing else, just like get a VPN and like flip it around to different places and just see how the world looks from those perspectives.
I remember and I still travel a lot, but I remember when I was going to Russia, the Ukraine, Belarus, all over Eastern Europe, all through Central Asia, and I'd go down to Azerbaijan or Kazakhstan and places like that. And people say, "Oh, I can't believe you're going down there. It's so scary and all that." But once you've done it, you build confidence, you build empathy. Especially in your some when I never would have seen the Silk Road, the road that Christ walked down.
Wow.
If you don't go to those places, and the facilities where they stayed, have been there hundreds and hundreds of years, literally, places where they would stay, where these travelers would go in and board their horses or board their camels, and they would go in and share tea. It's just unbelievable. And you just, sometimes, I remember Scott McNeil. I had lunch with him, and he told me directly. He said, "Always go to areas you fear the most. You're going to learn the most."
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget. The older you get too, Sanjay, you don't want to do it. And it's kind of strange because the older you get, the more you don't want to have those kind of experiences. But in reality, that's when you should always have it, because you want to keep the creativity and the compassion and the curiosity of a kid.
Yeah, and also you see the difference between what the locals believe and what the history books or the media is. Like they just did a synthetic lidar scan of the pyramids, and it seems like there's these giant pillars under the pyramids. It's incredible. It's going to rewrite our history books, assuming it's really there. How did these
And
ancient
it's not
civilizations?
hallucinating.
And yeah, maybe hallucination. I don't know. But what was interesting is they were interviewing like one of the locals in Egypt, who was not an Egyptologist. They weren't a professional or an expert, and they were asking them what they thought. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we've always known that the pyramids are being held up by something." It's like And then like you mentioned the road. They're like in Bimini, right here near Florida, there's this Bimini Road. There's these ancient roads that are you can go to them, that were built underwater, and there's no explanation how they could exist, and based on the age, how old they are. And so, you never hear about, you don't learn about this in school. There's sort of a narrative that they tell you, and anything inconsistent is called an out of place artifact. They're just saying, oh, well, it's just out of place. But as we get more and more data, we're realizing that so many things are out of place, and that
Well, when I was in the Ukraine, I remember going on the Black Sea and seeing oracles from the ancient Greeks on top of the mountain. And I've never heard anybody talk about that before. It was unbelievable. So south of Odessa, in those kind of areas, there's oracles where they used to pray. They would go up to these I don't know if women did it, but they would have guys up there that have their black hoods and things on at nighttime with the fire, and you would go in and talk, and they'd basically talk back to you, and you would be like, "Oh, I'm the presence of somebody inspired by God, essentially." And these oracles, but it's just incredible. And if you don't know, you don't know. And we sometimes, you're right, we tailor history the way we want to see it, don't we?
Yeah, the winners of the wars, they decide what happened. There's always like perspectives and what actually happened, but there's all kinds of filters, whether it's wars or Department of Education or the politics of the time, on a lot of things. So until you go, you don't see how fascinating and interesting things really are.
What do you think? Do you think concerts or yoga or theater or sports have the similar psychological effects as travel?
Yeah, a lot of them do. I mean, you meet new people, you have a new experience. Even you look at like this a stadium, right? Like that stadium could be a sports game or it could be like a Taylor Swift concert, and then you're gonna have a very different experience. Gonna be very different people. Or it could be Formula One or Taylor Swift or sports in the same area. So a lot of those experiences too is different people, it's different energy, it's different vibration, and it gets you out of your daily and gets that gets a dopamine flowing.
What do you think? What's the psychological significance of anticipation when planning a trip or attending an event? What do you think? How do you think that makes people feel?
What we know, it makes people feel great. What's interesting is that sometimes makes people feel better than the actual experience. So
Well,
you got
that's it. It doesn't it? Sometimes the anticipation is powerful. It stretches the pleasure of an experience long before it happens, right? I know when we travel to Pennsylvania in the summer, we start planning it the year before, right after this trip. We stopped the last trip, and we're planning it all year. And as we get closer and closer to it, it becomes, but that's part of the experience, isn't it? And actually, do you think there's a letdown after the experience is over?
well,
Because
the higher it's an expectation management. So there's different studies of the happiest country, and they use different measurements. And some of the studies indicated that Denmark is the happiest country in the world. Others say Costa Rica, others say Bali. There's different answers to this question depending on how you ask it. But so the explanation for Denmark was that people really manage their expectations. Like if people weren't striving to be billionaires or famous. They were, if you could get an apartment and a job and health insurance and a spouse, like that was what you hope for, and most people exceeded that. So most people actually did better than they anticipated, and so they were very happy as a result of just their expectations being kind of more reasonable. And so if your expectations are really high about a trip, you're going to really get excited about that planning process, and there's a higher risk that you're going to be disappointed if it doesn't meet those expectations.
yeah, or the anticipation's the other thing, and the research shows that people are happier when they have something to look forward to, right? There's a future, and I think that's throughout your life. Maybe that's why as a kid we're so happy, right? Because we're looking forward to the rest of our lives, and as you get older, you start to think about, this is I'm in the middle chapter or the end chapter, whatever, but you got to go down through and reorient your brain, right? Because we've got to kind of like having a flower in the springtime. We got to savor it and enjoy it and have fun. And by the way, you live longer. When you're feeling good, you live longer. You feel better, especially if you have stem cells.
Yeah, you certainly do.
So, in a world where technology dominates our time, why are real world experiences more important than ever, in your opinion? Because you're on the computer all day long, you're doing things. How much of your life do you think you spend on the computer today or on your phone?
Oh, it's more than I'd like to admit.
Yeah, what do you think? Like realistically.
I mean, there's no. I was just joking with like yesterday. My building is like an experimental community, and so there's a lot of things. Like, so we had a fitness class, a weights class, and then we had salsa afterwards. And I was kind of just joking with people, like, like luckily we live in a place where we have these things, like in our home building, but that's very rare. That's an experimental thing. So, but yeah, there's days where it's like work and work out and sleep, especially if I'm listening to my Whoop and going to bed when it thinks that I should. There's
What is
only
that you have on?
it's a Whoop. It's basically a heart rate variability device. It's actually a good way to measure happiness, or at least the balance of your different, kind of not necessarily like how excited you are, but kind of like the balance of your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. It's more accurate than cholesterol in actually measuring the likelihood of a heart attack. So if you have HRV, you can that's another way to like kind of like look at your happiness is, okay, if your HRV isn't where it needs to be, you may need to sleep more, may need to exercise more. So technology lets us optimize our time in a way where what I thought was the most fascinating thing, it doesn't tell me to go to bed every night. It's not like, like your parents are like, go to bed, it's late. You actually don't have to go to bed every night on time. But if you measure your HRV and your strain and your recovery, you can figure out which nights you need to go to bed on time for optimal health. And
And you
it's
do
not
that?
every
Go
day.
to bed on time when that thing goes off?
I try, and half the time I pull it off, half the time my dopamine addiction takes over, and I jump on the computer and I get on YouTube or record something. So it's sort of like I'm halfway there. I'm taking it very seriously in terms of it. I know it's right now because if I really pay attention to my body, and just the data just makes it more obvious, right? You kind of feel it, but we tend to get used to that feeling. So the that signal from your body, whether it's thirst or sleep, that you kind of like just fight through it, and then you don't really have it anymore. But having like the hard data that you can, it's really something. So I would definitely recommend having 24-hour heart rate variability is I mean, in itself, it's an experience, right? And then if you measure it, like when you travel, you'll kind of notice like how your HRV goes up when you're getting this dopamine. And so it's all, it all gets down to math, even though we're talking about happiness here.
No, it's great. Listen, we're coming up to the top of the show. Closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me at Sanjay at runday.ai, like Runday runs your day. And closing thoughts was just, we're entering this new agentic age, and more happiness is possible than ever before. And experiences are, a key part of that. And travel is, really never going to be replaced. And we'll be able to travel in more virtual ways with augmented reality. But just seeing, smelling, especially meeting people, that's a key part of humanity that we've lost a little bit.
Sounds great. Sanjay, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. And thanks to all my audience for joining one more time. Simple Nights Presents. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And we'll be back to you again next week with another exciting edition. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves and be happy.